Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I want to shed some light on a drug that many people have probably taken once in their life. It's called phenylephrine. It's very likely you've taken phenylephrine for a really bad stuffy nose, only to realize later that your nose is still pretty congested. This is a drug that's been heavily advertised in America, but I believe it to be one of the most fraudulent drugs to be ever sold. Today, I'm going to share with you the reasons behind my skepticism. At a recent FDA meeting, it was determined that oral phenylephrine, often found in over-the-counter cold and flu medications, is no longer considered effective. This decision was based on years of scientific evidence and research, which suggests that phenylephrine simply doesn't provide the relief it claims to offer. In response to this FDA advisory meeting, CVS has made a bold move. They decide to no longer sell nasal decongestants with phenylephrine as the only active ingredient in their stores. We're very likely to see other pharmacies follow suit here. Phenylephrine is not always easily recognizable by the name alone. This decongestant can be found under various generic names. It comes in different forms, such as oral tablets, nasal sprays, and combination cold and flu liquids. This diversity in presentation can make it quite challenging for consumers to identify when they are actually using a product that contains phenylephrine. When I recently shared these articles, an interesting comment I received from Beausoleil was, "As a chronically congested person, I feel so scammed." And I definitely feel that way too. Z-Dog asks, "What ingredients do I want in my cold medicine then?" And I'll be answering this towards the end of the video. But to truly grasp the phenylephrine dilemma, it's essential to dive into some history. Back in the 70s, phenylephrine was approved as a decongestant by the FDA, but it coexisted alongside with pseudoephedrine, which many people found to be much more effective. Fast forward to the 1990s and mid-2000s, and Sudafed was really the go-to decongestant for many Americans. However, during this time, the United States experienced a methamphetamine epidemic. In response, Congress enacted the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act in 2006, which heavily regulated Sudafed sales due to its role as a precursor in meth production. This led to restrictions on purchases and monitoring of Sudafed sales across the nation. So let's take a look at this fascinating graph. It tells a significant part of this story. Prior to 2006, Sudafed sales were soaring, and it was really the preferred decongestant for many people. However, after the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act in 2006, you can see a dramatic flip in the sales trends. As you can see, phenylephrine sales surged past those of Sudafed. This shift was driven by regulatory changes. But it's important to consider whether, the effectiveness of these medications changes alongside with the sales numbers. In fact, it's estimated that in the past year alone, phenylephrine generated a whopping $1.8 billion in sales for pharma. While it's not as massive of a market as, say, other drugs like Humira, which is roughly evaluated to be about a $20 to $21 billion industry, it's still a significant amount of money spent on a drug that many people have found to be ineffective. Another frustrating aspect of phenylephrine is its cost. It's often out-of-pocket expense, requiring you have to pay cash. In my experience, it's almost never covered by insurance. So I find this, especially frustrating for everyday individuals who had to spend their hard-earned money on what they believe was an effective nasal decongestant when they're sick, have a cold, or suffering from the flu. Phenylephrine has been out on the market for definitely a long time, and it indeed raises ethical questions in healthcare. When data shows a drug doesn't work or the initial research is flawed, one might wonder why we don't act more swiftly to remove it from the market. In September of this year, 2023, the FDA held a panel ruling, shedding even more light on the ongoing debate about the effectiveness of phenylephrine. What's perhaps even more noteworthy is that this ruling led to the filing of a class action lawsuit against major pharmaceutical companies like Johnson & Johnson and Procter & Gamble. These types of class action lawsuits can take time to unfold and often involve a substantial number of plaintiffs. While the potential financial exposure to these companies is still relatively unknown, it's of material importance to recognize that they will be facing legal challenges for promoting a product that, according to some people, they knew didn't work effectively. This underscores the gravity of the situation and really the need for transparency and accountability in the pharmaceutical industry. Did you know you could earn free Bitcoin on your next prescription refill? With my startup, Howdy, not only can you save on prescriptions, but you can also earn free Bitcoin on each refill. If you're enjoying this content, please hit the like, subscribe buttons. Sharing with a friend helps this channel grow. To start saving and earning free Bitcoin, sign up today through the link in the description below. One of the most pressing questions surrounding phenylephrine is, how did this get approved in the first place by the FDA? The approval process for medications is typically complex and can involve various clinical markers to determine the efficacy of the product. When phenylephrine was first approved, the primary clinical marker used to evaluate its effectiveness was nasal airway resistance. This involved placing a peak flow meter over a person's airway, typically the mouth, where someone has to blow out air forcefully. A sliding scale would sort of move based on the amount of air that's pushed out. And from there, they would measure the effectiveness of the nasal airway resistance. However, in more recent years, there's been a transition to a subjective nasal congestion score. So basically, it's just a questionnaire that asks you how congested is your nose. And it's done on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being the easiest to breathe through your nose and 10 being the most difficult. But this transition raises a really important question about the evaluation of medications. The shift from clinical markers to subjective patient experiences. It reminds me of the age-old adage, treating patients versus numbers. It's crucial to consider both clinical data and how patients actually feel when assessing the effectiveness with any medication. From the get-go, they should just ask, how do you feel? Do you feel like you can breathe out your nose better? But it seems to me that they just never did that until much later. As I learned in pharmacy school, one of the fundamental concepts we study is pharmacokinetics. Essentially, how do drugs work in the body and how do we measure these effects? One crucial parameter in pharmacokinetics is bioavailability, which determines how much of an oral drug is absorbed into your body. Now, let's talk about phenylephrine. They cited the bioavailability here to be roughly about 38%. However, in reality, the bioavailability of phenylephrine is shockingly less than 1%. That's right, less than 1% of the drug you take orally gets absorbed into your body. This incredibly low bioavailability raises serious questions about the drug's effectiveness. When so little of the drug reaches the bloodstream, it's no wonder that many people find phenylephrine to be lacking in its ability to provide relief from congestion. Another critical aspect of understanding how drugs work in their body is their half-life. It determines how quickly a drug is metabolized and broken down. In the case of phenylephrine, the actual half-life has been found to be less than 4 hours. A shorter half-life like this means that the drug is rapidly metabolized and excreted from the body. And this has a significant impact on the effectiveness because it suggests that the drug would need to be redosed frequently to maintain any potential relief from congestion. So not only does phenylephrine have an astonishingly low bioavailability, a short half-life, it also raises questions about how often it needs to be taken to have any meaningful effect. These factors combined make you wonder why it's been a go-to drug for so long. With so many cough and cold medications on the market, it's crucial to make informed choices. Each person's symptoms are unique, and what works for one person may not work for another. Sort of in the next slides, I'll be teaching you how to read product labels and understand the active ingredients. If you're still unsure what you're doing, consult with a pharmacist and healthcare professional. So let's break down a real example of how to better understand how to read medication labels. Here's a cough and flu combination medication by Equate. You can see that in the bright red circle, there are 3 active ingredients, each with a different purpose. Acetaminophen, which is known as Tylenol. This ingredient is used for pain and fever relief. You'll see dextromethorphan. It's included for cough suppression. And then you'll see doxylamine. It acts as an antihistamine. Understanding these active ingredients and what their purposes are is essential when selecting the right medication for your specific symptoms. Take a closer look at the next example. This medication contains 3 active ingredients here, each serving a different and specific purpose. Again, you have acetaminophen here, This is commonly known as Tylenol and is included here for pain relief and fever reduction. You'll see dextromethorphan. It's added for cough suppression. And look, there's phenylephrine here, and that's used as a nasal decongestant. Here, on most medications, you'll typically find 5 typical purposes for over-the-counter cough and cold relief. The first purpose is pain and fever relief. More than likely, you'll see acetaminophen here. You'll see cough suppression, and that's usually a reference to dextromethorphan, and that helps to suppress coughs. You'll see a cough expectorant, and usually guaifenesin is used here to help loosen and clear mucus from the airways. And then you'll see nasal decongestants. Sometimes these ingredients could be pseudoephedrine or Sudafed, which can help you alleviate nasal congestion. And then sometimes you'll see antihistamines. These ingredients like doxylamine can address allergy-related symptoms and sometimes help with sleep as well. But if you're dealing with a really severe nasal congestion and you don't have a fever or cough, I would just probably consider getting Sudafed by itself from the pharmacy. It's highly effective for nasal congestion, but it's kept behind the pharmacy counter. So you'll have to ask the pharmacist for it and be prepared to show your ID. This extra step might seem like a nuisance, but it's to combat the misuse of the medication. While Sudafed can effectively relieve nasal congestion, it's also going to make you feel pretty wired and restless. If you prefer a different option, you can try nasal sprays like Afrin or products that contain phenylephrine as a nasal spray. So just keep in mind, if you're using these nasal sprays, not to use them more than a couple days. Otherwise, you're going to run into potential side effects and dependency and rebound congestion. Phenylephrine stands as one of the longest debated drugs on the market. It's a reminder that as consumers, we should probably always question and choose wisely when it comes to our health. Thank you for joining me with this discussion, and until next time.